For pretty much all of human history, a miracle has been unfolding right in front of our eyes when we've definitely taken for granted. Think about it. A tiny seed becomes a giant tree, using basically just sunlight, water, and air. It is without a doubt the single most important chemical reaction on Earth. And yet for centuries, how it worked was a complete mystery. So today, we're diving into the incredible scientific quest to decode that miracle, the step-by-step unraveling of photosynthesis.
So here's the central mystery, the question that stumped some of the greatest minds for ages. How in the world does a plant create solid stuff, wood, leaves, fruit, out of what seems like nothing? It's a question that just defied any simple explanation, and it kicked off this multi-generational detective story to finally get an answer.
Okay, so before we really dig into the clues, it's worth taking a second to appreciate that this whole process was seen as a genuine miracle. I mean, to understand it was to understand the very foundation of life itself, the engine that literally powers our entire planet.
So where did the investigation even begin? Well, like any great mystery, it all started with a few really curious scientists whose brilliant and, surprisingly simple experiments started to uncover the very first essential clues. Let's meet our first detective, Joseph Priestley. Back in the 1770s, he did this simple but totally profound experiment. He took a sealed glass jar and showed that a candle would go out or a mouse couldn't breathe. He called that air injured. But then, and this is the cool part, he put a mint plant inside, and after a while, that air was restored. A candle could burn again. Priestley had just discovered the first huge clue. Plants release something that purifies the air and, supports life.
Now, Priestley's discovery was a massive breakthrough, but there was a catch. Other scientists tried to replicate it, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. There was clearly another factor at play here, a key ingredient that nobody had figured out yet.
And that's where Jan Ingenhousz comes into the picture. He repeated Priestley's experiments, but he was a careful observer, and he noticed a pattern. The plant only restored the air when it was in the sunlight. In the dark, absolutely nothing happened. That was it. By showing that light was the essential catalyst, Ingenhousz had found the second major clue. The magic only happens when the sun is shining.
Okay, so the investigation is about to get even more specific. A scientist named T.W. Engelmann started wondering, is all sunlight created equal? And the experiment he came up with was just brilliant. He used a prism to split sunlight into a rainbow and shone it across a strand of algae. Now, to see where the action was, he flooded the whole thing with bacteria that are naturally drawn to oxygen. And the result? It was crystal clear. The bacteria swarmed to the parts lit by red and blue light. That was the proof. Those colors are the high-octane fuel for photosynthesis. All right, so let's do a quick recap. By the end of the 19th century, our detective file was getting pretty thick. We knew that plants release oxygen, we knew it needs sunlight and specifically red and blue light, and we knew they were making glucose, a sugar, for food. The basic ingredients were finally on the table.
All this knowledge allowed scientists to sketch out a rough first draft of the equation. You've got carbon dioxide and water going in, and you get a carbohydrate and oxygen coming out. But, and this is a huge but, this simple formula had a deep mystery that stumped everyone. Where exactly does the oxygen gas come from? Is it being split off from the carbon dioxide, or is it coming from the water? The answer, as it turns out, would come from a completely unexpected place. Not from studying big plants, but from the work of a microbiologist studying some very, very weird bacteria.
And this is where Cornelius van Niel enters the story, and honestly, his insight was a stroke of genius. He was studying these strange bacteria that could photosynthesize, but they didn't use water. Instead, they used hydrogen sulfide, H2S, and he noticed they didn't release oxygen as a waste product, they released pure sulfur. When he put the two reactions side by side, he saw the pattern. Plants use H2O and release O2. These bacteria use H2S and release S. See it? This amazing comparison led him to a landmark hypothesis. In both cases, the carbon dioxide part was being used to build the carbohydrates. So the other molecule, the water in plants or the hydrogen sulfide in bacteria, that must be the one getting split apart, releasing its byproduct. His conclusion? The oxygen that plants release has to come from the splitting of water. A brilliant hypothesis, right? But, in science, you need cold, hard proof. And that proof came years later, using radioisotope tracing. It's so clever. Scientists grew plants with water that contained a special, heavy, traceable form of oxygen called O18. And guess what? The oxygen gas the plants released was also the heavy O18. Then, just to be sure, they did it again.
But this time, the heavy oxygen was in the carbon dioxide, and the oxygen the plants released, totally normal. Van Niel was right. The case of the oxygen's origin was officially closed.
And with that final definitive piece of evidence, the solar code was unlocked. This is it, the complete and balanced equation. What it's really showing is something called a redox reaction, where water gets oxidized, meaning it gives away electrons, and carbon dioxide gets reduced. It gains those electrons. It's just this elegant transfer of energy, all powered by light.
Okay, so we've cracked the chemical what? But that just opens up a whole new question, right? The where. Where inside the plant does this incredible reaction actually happen? The next step was to find the physical machinery. So let's zoom in, way in. The action isn't just happening in the leaf in general, it's happening deep inside its cells, in these tiny specialized green compartments. These are the chloroplasts. They are the microscopic solar factories where all the work gets done.
And this isn't just some random green blob. This factory has a highly organized assembly line. Its internal structure is absolutely key to how it works, with two main areas we need to know to understand the whole process.
So first, you have the grana. You can see them there, those stacks of green disks. That's where the sunlight is actually captured. And second, you've got the stroma. That's the fluid-filled space all around them. That's where the sugars get built. Just think of them as the solar panels in the factory floor.
Because here's the next big reveal. Photosynthesis isn't just one single event. It's actually a brilliant two-stage process. One part is all about capturing the solar energy, and the other part is about using that captured energy to build the final product.
So first up, you have the light-dependent reactions. These happen on the solar panels, the grana. Then you have the light-independent reactions, sometimes called the carbon reactions, and those happen out on the factory floor, the stroma. They are two halves of one beautifully integrated system.
Let's break that down real quick. In stage 1, the light reactions, sunlight is used to literally split water molecules apart. That's what releases the oxygen we all breathe. But crucially, this stage also charges up these tiny molecular batteries, molecules called ATP and NADPH. Then in stage 2, those fully charged batteries move out into the stroma. They provide all the power needed for the carbon reactions to grab CO2 from the air and build it into sugar. It's that simple. One stage makes the power, the next stage uses the power.
I mean, it's just an incredible scientific journey when you look back at it all. It starts with Priestley noticing that plants restore the air way back in the 1770s. Then Ingenhousz adds sunlight to the mix. Engelmann maps the specific colors of light. And finally, Van Niel solves the great oxygen mystery in the 1930s. Each discovery, across centuries, built on the one before it.
And in the end, decoding this one chemical equation did so much more than just explain how plants grow. It revealed the foundational engine that powers nearly all life on this planet. Every single bite of food you eat, every breath you take, is a direct gift from this ancient, elegant, beautiful chemical reaction.
Which really brings us to a final, pretty big thought. This one, elegant, solar-powered process has sustained our world for billions of years. And knowing in all this detail exactly how it works, well, it leads to a really profound question. If this single process underpins our very existence, how can we do a better job of protecting it and maybe even learn from it to build a more sustainable future for ourselves?